It wasn't a fight, not even a disagreement, just a moment. I came home early that Tuesday. I had groceries in one arm, her favorite coffee in the other. No reason, no anniversary. I just saw it in the window and thought, she'd smile at this. Stupid, right? She looked at the cup, then at me, and said, "You didn't forget the oat milk this time?" That was it. No, thank you. No smile. Just another quiet correction. I stood there in the doorway, shoes still wet from the rain, holding that $7 latte like it meant something. She'd been on the couch all day. I knew that. The remote was still in her hand. Hair messy, sweatshirt inside out. I think something inside me expected her to realize it. Just for once. To look up and say, "Sorry. I've been off. Thank you for thinking of me." But she didn't. She just went back to her show. I didn't even know what it was. I wasn't invited to sit. She sipped the coffee 10 minutes later. Didn't say a word. I stood in the hallway and watched her from behind the wall. Not creepy, just quiet. Because I'd been testing something for weeks. Every small thing I used to do, opening her car door, leaving notes in her bag, warming up her side of the bed, I'd stopped doing them one by one. Slowly, quietly, to see if she'd notice. She never did. And every little thing she used to do, calling me on my lunch breaks, tucking her cold feet under my leg while we watched movies, scribbling hearts on the bathroom mirror, they were gone too. Faded. Forgotten. We were two strangers playing house. But Tuesday? That Tuesday was different. That's when I knew I wasn't just being dramatic. That's when I realized she'd stopped loving me a long time ago. Because what happened after the coffee, that's when I knew she had someone else. Not because I found a message, not because she slipped up, but because of what she didn't do. At 9:42 p.m., she told me she was going to bed early. At 9:57, I heard her whispering behind the bathroom door. At 10:01, she came out, cheeks flushed, phone in hand, eyes wide when she saw me standing there. I didn't say a word, just raised one eyebrow. She laughed, nervously, and said, "What?" I was watching TikToks. Her phone screen was black. I just nodded and said, "Cool." She went to bed. I didn't follow. I sat on the kitchen floor for a long time that night. Not crying, not angry, just quiet. Because now I knew the truth. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She just stopped trying at all. So I made a decision. No fights, no drama, no confrontations, just silence, distance, and eventually, consequences. Because she once said, "Making you happy isn't my job." Fine. Let's see how she handles a husband who stops pretending to care. The next morning, I made her coffee. Black, no sugar, just how she hated it. I slid the cup across the table while she scrolled on her phone and said nothing. She glanced at it, then at me, then back at her phone. No complaint. No thank you. Just silence. That was confirmation. You see, Reina always used to correct me. She had this way of teaching me things I already knew. How she liked her eggs, how I folded towels wrong, how I didn't load the dishwasher her way. So when she didn't mention the bitter, awful coffee, I knew. She was too distracted to play the wife. That day, I decided to stop playing the husband. I didn't go to work. Called in sick. I watched her instead, quietly. Not like a jealous man. More like a scientist watching an experiment unravel. She left at 11:23 a.m. Said she had brunch with a client. I kissed her on the cheek and smiled. She flinched. She didn't see me follow her. I parked 2 blocks down and watched her laugh at someone's joke through the cafe window. A tall guy. Same one from last month's networking retreat. Same guy whose name she once let slip in her sleep. He touched her hand. She didn't pull away. They weren't even subtle. He reached across the table and brushed something off her lip, like he had every right in the world to do that. Like I didn't exist. My stomach didn't sink. That surprised me. I thought I'd feel shattered, but I didn't. I just felt dull, like someone had drained the color from everything and left me watching on mute. When she got home, I was already back, folding laundry. Calm. Too calm. She walked past me, dropped her purse, and said, "You okay? You look weird." I shrugged and smiled. "No oat milk in the fridge. Thought you might have picked some up while you were out." That froze her. Just for a second. Her eyes twitched, not enough for someone else to notice, but I'd been watching her for 8 years. I knew every flicker, every twitch, every guilty breath she took. "Oh, I forgot," she said, walking past me into the bedroom. She didn't ask me about my day. Didn't ask why I was home early. Didn't ask if I saw anyone she knew. And I didn't ask her anything either. I wasn't going to give her the fight she was waiting for. That would have been too easy. She expected outrage, a slammed door, an accusation. Instead, I sat on the bed beside her, picked up her foot, and started massaging it while she scrolled through her phone again. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "You're being weird," she muttered. I just smiled and said, "I know." That night, I slept soundly. For the first time in weeks, I didn't toss, didn't turn, didn't check her side of the bed for signs she'd gotten up to text him. Because I already knew what came next. She'd keep lying. I'd keep listening. And when the time came, she'd beg for the version of me she took for granted. But I wouldn't be there anymore. The next 2 weeks were a quiet performance. A routine I'd never rehearsed, but suddenly knew by heart. I smiled more, asked how her day was, rubbed her shoulders when she looked tired. I played the role she'd already stopped believing in. And the thing is, she didn't notice I wasn't real anymore. She thought I was healing, that I'd stopped being needy. But in truth, I was watching her erase me from her life with every fake excuse and every overly charged phone call she took in the bathroom. She kept slipping. That was the funny part. The more I acted like I didn't care, the less careful she became. Once, I heard her say, "He's too soft to do anything," while laughing. I don't know who she was talking to. I didn't ask. Another time, she accidentally sent me a voice note meant for someone else. It started with her saying, "I can't talk now, he's home," then it cut off. When I mentioned it casually, pretending to be confused, she played dumb, then called it a work message. From someone named Tay. Same name as that first text. The name that still hadn't left my head. And me? I nodded, smiled, cleaned the dishes, told her, no worries. Because I wanted her to feel safe, comfortable, like she was getting away with it. She was making plans. I could see it in how she started checking the calendar more. The way she asked about my schedule, as if she was looking for windows when the apartment would be empty. One afternoon, I left the house, drove around the corner, and waited. 42 minutes later, a car I didn't recognize pulled into our driveway. I didn't even have to get out of my own. I just sat there, watched the passenger door open, and saw a man walk inside carrying takeout and wine. She'd told me she had food poisoning, that she needed to rest. She was wearing the dress I bought her on our 5th anniversary. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even blink. I just took a photo. One clean, undeniable photo. Then I drove to my friend Mason's place, the only person who knew what I was doing, what I was becoming. He looked at the photo and said, "So now what?" And I answered, "Now we stop pretending this is about saving the marriage." Because in her eyes, I was still the weak one. The man who brought her coffee she didn't drink. The man who folded her sweaters and waited for affection like a starving dog. She hadn't realized yet that her silence had taught me something more powerful than rage. It had taught me how to vanish from her world, piece by piece, without making a sound. By week 3, something in her started to fray, not all at once, but in quiet, nervous twitches. Little things she thought I wouldn't notice. She'd come home earlier than usual and glance around like she expected something to be missing. Her eyes kept landing on the closet, on the drawer where I kept my passport, like she was checking inventory. One night she opened the fridge and just stared. I asked if something was wrong, and she said, "No, just checking if you bought oat milk." Oat milk. The same brand she used to complain about. Now suddenly she cared. She asked me 3 separate times that week what my weekend plans were. Each time I shrugged and said, "Nothing big." I could see the calculation behind her eyes, like she was building 2 separate timelines. One where I stayed, and one where I disappeared long enough for her to live without me. And so I gave her space. All the space in the world. I didn't text her when she left the house. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't even pretend to care about her vague explanations. I just nodded, smiled, held the door open like a gentleman. She'd say, "I won't be too late." I'd reply, "You don't owe me an explanation." And she'd blink. Every time. Like she couldn't tell if I meant it. But I did. Because by then, I wasn't her husband anymore. I was the mirror she was too afraid to look into. She started doing strange things, things that didn't match the version of her I used to know. I came home once and found my favorite hoodie washed and folded on my pillow. She cooked dinner 2 nights in a row and even lit a candle. One we got on a trip to Oregon years ago, one I thought she'd thrown out. Another night she sat on the edge of the bed and asked, "Are we okay?" And I just smiled and said, "Of course." That word crushed her more than any fight ever could. Because for the first time in our marriage, She couldn't read me. That terrified her. I let her spiral in peace. I let her walk around our apartment like it was a stranger's house. Familiar walls, unfamiliar energy. She couldn't predict me anymore, and that scared her far more than any confrontation would have. What she didn't know was that I had already begun moving pieces quietly behind the scenes. Separate bank account, P.O. box, digital copies of every shared document stored on a drive she didn't know existed. But no, I wasn't preparing to run. I was preparing to let her watch me leave. Slowly, on my terms. Because she once said that making me happy wasn't her job. And now? Now she was starting to understand what a jobless life really looked like. It started with her asking if I wanted to watch something together. We hadn't shared a screen in months. Not a movie, not a show, not even a dumb YouTube clip. She stood awkwardly in the doorway holding a bag of microwave popcorn like she wasn't sure how to offer it to me. I said I had some work to finish. There was nothing on my laptop but a blank desktop. The next night, she tried again. She was suddenly interested in all the little things she used to roll her eyes at. My dumb card collection, the new boots I bought, the boring stories from work that she used to tune out halfway through. I'd be halfway through a sentence and she'd interrupt with, "Wait, really? That's interesting." It was never interesting to her before. But here's what really tipped her hand. She started wearing perfume again. Not just when going out, but around the house. She was trying to reintroduce herself, like maybe I'd forgotten who she was and she could edit the memory. That's how I knew she was losing control. There's a kind of silence that makes people panic, not the cold, resentful kind, but the polite, peaceful kind. The kind where the other person seems genuinely unbothered. That's the silence I gave her, because I knew she was waiting for me to crack, to ask, to confront. But I didn't. And one evening, she finally broke. She walked into the kitchen while I was drying dishes and just stood there, watching me. I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch so far it snapped. And then, with a shaking voice, she said, "Do you still love me?" I didn't look up. I just folded the towel slowly and said, "I don't know how to answer that anymore." That single line wrecked her. Not because it was cruel, but because it was honest, and quiet, and unrehearsed. She tried to laugh it off, but I could see her hands trembling. She leaned against the counter, and for the first time, she looked like the outsider in our home. Like she was standing in someone else's kitchen, with no idea how to be welcome again. And then came the mistake. The next morning, I checked the mail. A handwritten envelope, no return address. Just my name. Inside was a single printed photo, her and the guy from the cafe, holding hands in a parking garage. Time-stamped. Blurry, but clear enough. No note. No explanation. Someone wanted me to know what she really was. Someone who clearly didn't know I already did. I left the envelope on her side of the bed. Nothing else. No note. No dramatic gesture. She found it that evening. I was already out. When I came home, she was sitting on the floor beside the bed, holding the envelope in both hands like it might explode. She didn't ask how I got it. She didn't accuse. She didn't lie. She just said, "I can fix this." And I finally looked her in the eyes and replied, "That's not your job anymore." She didn't cry, but her silence was loud enough to shake the walls. She stopped leaving the apartment without makeup, started hovering in doorways, offering to make me coffee even though she never made it right. Every little gesture now carried this desperate edge, like she was begging to be seen, begging to be useful again. Like she finally understood what it meant to feel unnecessary in your own home. But I didn't reward the effort. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I'd given her years of small, quiet love, and she treated it like background noise. I wasn't going to reward panic when she ignored peace. She asked if I wanted to go out for dinner one night. Her treat. A place we hadn't been to in over a year. Somewhere we used to go when we still touched each other without thinking. I said, "I already ate." She paused. "With who?" I let the question hang in the air and walked past her to the bathroom. Truth was, I had eaten alone, but I liked how the question burned in her throat. She started texting me during the day again. Random things. Photos of our dog. A meme she thought I'd laugh at. A reminder about laundry. I didn't reply to most of them. Not out of spite. I just didn't feel anything. They didn't pull me toward her anymore. They felt like messages from someone trying to impersonate the woman I used to love. Then came the evening she stood in the hallway crying. Not sobbing. Not putting on a show. Just quietly wiping at her face, thinking I couldn't see her from the kitchen. She was holding a hoodie of mine, one I thought I'd lost. just holding it against her stomach like it could bring something back. I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't ask what was wrong, because I knew exactly what was wrong. Her affair hadn't just broken us. It had erased the version of me that would have dropped everything to fix what she shattered. And now that he was gone, she was stuck staring at the stranger she'd created, a man who was no longer bending for her comfort. Later that night, she knocked on the bedroom door I now kept closed. I opened it halfway. "I know I messed up," she said, eyes puffy. "But I never stopped loving you." I didn't flinch. "That's not true," I said. "You just never expected me to stop loving you back." She stepped forward, but I gently closed the door between us. And on the other side, I could hear her breathing, heavy, confused, afraid. The kind of breathing you only make when you realize too late that the bridge you burned was the one you'd need to survive the fall. It was a Saturday. Gray sky, wind pushing leaves across the sidewalk. We were supposed to go to her sister's house for a birthday lunch. Normally I'd fake a migraine or say I was working late, but this time, I went. Not because I wanted to play happy husband, but because I didn't have to. She was unraveling without my help. We walked in holding separate silences. Her sister, Marla, greeted us with a hug, but her eyes kept darting between us like she could feel something crawling under the surface. We sat across from each other at the long dining table, pretending we weren't two people who hadn't made eye contact in 3 days. Midway through the meal, her brother-in-law asked me how work was going. I said fine. Raina interrupted with a fake laugh and said, "He's been so busy lately. I barely even see him." That was the moment. The entire room paused, like the air shifted and everyone knew something was off. I didn't say a word, just looked at her, calm, silent, deliberate. She blinked too fast, picked up her wine glass. Her hand was shaking. Marla changed the subject, but the damage was done. 15 minutes later, Raina excused herself to the bathroom. She stayed gone for too long. When she finally came back, her mascara was smudged and her voice was brittle. "We should head out," she whispered. I nodded. Didn't argue. In the car, she didn't speak for most of the drive. Just stared out the window, mouth tight. And then, right as we turned onto our street, she whispered, "Do they know?" I didn't ask who they were. I didn't need to. I just said, "People notice patterns, not lies." She closed her eyes like I'd hit her. Not physically, emotionally. Directly in that space she'd been trying to protect, the part that wanted me to be silent forever. That night, she knocked on my door again. Same soft rhythm, like muscle memory. When I opened it, she was holding the framed photo from our wedding, the one we hadn't looked at in over a year. Her hands were shaking, her thumb pressed against her own face in the glass. "I want to fix it," she said. "Tell me what to do." And for a second, just one flicker, I almost said something kind. But then I remembered the months she spent looking through me like I wasn't there. The laughter in the cafe, the way she let that man touch her like it meant nothing. So I stepped back and said, "You can start by sleeping in your choices." And I closed the door before she could answer. Behind it, I heard her whisper, "Please don't stop loving me." But I already had. 2 weeks after that night with the wedding photo, she asked me to sit down. No makeup, no mask. Just Raina, pale and small, looking more like a memory than a wife. She said she'd ended it with him. She didn't cry, not this time. She looked numb, like she'd already accepted that even if she put the fire out, the house was still gone. She said she wanted to go to therapy, said she wanted to rebuild, said she wanted to earn her way back. I listened, and then I told her the truth. I didn't hate her. I didn't want revenge. I just didn't feel anything anymore. The love wasn't poisoned. It had simply gone. Quietly, piece by piece. The way frost disappears from glass once the sun hits it. I moved out the following Friday. No drama, no shouting. I packed my things while she sat on the edge of the bed and whispered, "I didn't think you'd actually leave." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "That's the problem," I said. And then I left. Now, months later, my apartment is smaller, quieter, but the silence doesn't hurt anymore. It heals. I cook what I want. I read late into the night. I joined a pickup basketball league with guys who don't know a single thing about my past, and that's a gift I didn't realize I needed. She still texts sometimes. Nothing cruel, just check-ins, memories, regret wrapped in politeness. I don't respond, because I've learned that love isn't something you beg for. It's something you water, protect, notice. She once told me that making me happy wasn't her job, and she was right. But here's what she didn't understand. It also wasn't my job to wait for her to realize that. I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm just free. And for the first time in years, that's enough.